Well, welcome once again to ArtBreak, everyone. Today we'll have a unique opportunity to hear about really a unique cultural organization in Grand Rapids that you may not be aware of. And this is the Grand Rapids African American Museum and Archives, known through its acronym GRAAMA, which we'll hear about more in a minute. It was founded in 2015, and the goal from its mission statement, which is wonderfully concise and inclusive, is to promote, preserve, display, collect, and honor the lives and culture, history, and art of African Americans in West Michigan. This museum is unique in that not only collects and exhibits historic artifacts, but it also collects genealogies, oral histories, as well as creates documentary videos that relate to the African American experience and history in Grand Rapids and West Michigan. Its founder, George Byard, who we're fortunate to have with us today, specifically chose the museum's name because of the acronym it created. As I mentioned, GRAAMA, which is a tribute to his grandmother, who at an early age instilled him with a love of art and history. And he also wanted to dedicate it to all grandmothers who keep the history, particularly family history, alive. Since he was a young boy, Mr. Baird has been a collector, including baseball cards, comics, and finally art. And then at the age of 15, he started dreaming of owning his own art gallery, which he did after he moved to Grand Rapids in 1986. A few years later, he founded the Byard Gallery of Fine African American Arts and Books, which was really a well-established gallery for nearly 25 years, and certainly the most prominent gallery in West Michigan to feature African American arts. Later, as Mr. Byard was pursuing his own genealogy, his interest became expanded from art to really focus on the African American legacy in Grand Rapids, which had been largely ignored. So the museum is looking toward a new future and new developments, and it's, I'm sure with Mr. Byard's passions, creativity, and life experiences, it will provide the GRAAMA with a unique endowment for years to come. So please welcome George Byard.
Can everybody hear? Well, I thank you for coming to this afternoon. As you said, I'm George Byard, and one of the things that I always start out talking about, he already said a little bit, is that my grandmother, we won't call her a hoarder. She was more like a collector, but she never threw anything away. And she went into the nursing home, and I took over her house for a while, and I was just blown away by some of the things that I found in this house that they had for easily 50 years. It was a daily experience for me. I mean, you know, I'd go down in the basement, pull open a box, and it'd be a Civil War uniform in there, or another box would have a Monopoly set with wooden houses, or another box would have a Colt revolver or Stetson hats, and she just collected everything. I found things that I did in the first grade tucked away in neat little envelopes. One of the things that she had that I got another presentation on were photographs, and we were, my dad's side of the family were free African Americans. My mom's side came from a plantation, but my dad's side was in the, it's in the film. I'll wait till I get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, that is why we chose the name Grandma, because we wanted to honor grandmas, not only my grandmother, but grandmothers in general, who the ones in the family to keep the history and the traditions and pass down all the good and bad things about a family. And so for us to start our museum and call it Grandma, of course, everything in Grand Rapids starts with GR anyway, so it's going to be GRA something. So we decided that we wanted to make it Grandma. See if I can get this tech stuff going here. You can hear a little bit of Bob Marley. Oh, he's gone. My early days were from Delaware. I was born in Wilmington, Delaware. And I tell people now, I'm just an old guy from Delaware, but you can't say that around here too much, so people get upset. But that's what I am. I'm an old guy from Delaware. And we moved here, 86, and that was the time that we used to start our creative juices and start our art gallery. We moved to Michigan, and that's when we started the Buyer Gallery, and then started Grandma. And then I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things that we're doing now and some of the future challenges that we have coming up. But my early influences, that's my dad right there. And he was a struggling artist. This is where I got my talents from, I'm sure. But, at the time, coming right out of World War II, there weren't very many jobs for Black artists. So he became a facilities man at one of the, in Delaware, there's only two companies, but one of them is DuPont. And he worked for DuPont for, most of his life, and then crossed over and started working for Hercules Chemical Company. But in his capacity as a facilities person, he'd always bring home reams of paper. They changed the logo every couple of months, and we'd have just reams of paper. So for art, it was easy for us to learn how to draw. And then I'd copy him. And he also kind of subtly were giving us an idea of African American history, in that he was also not a collector, but hobbyist, I would say. We had a train set, and he would take the porters and paint them all brown tone, skin tone, because at that time, even when you bought toys and games, there were very few African American, or Negro as they called it, people in the boxes of toys or dolls or any kind of representation for African Americans. And so he would paint the porters brown, and then he was also a flight enthusiast. I think in another life he would have been a pilot. A lot of his drawings were of airplanes. Even when he went to Germany, he would be drawing pictures of the planes, the different kind of planes that he saw. And he painted a picture. We had a model of the X-15, and it's just subtly, he didn't paint the pilot brown, but he painted a couple of the workmen brown. And it was just kind of a subtle way of saying, you can achieve more, you can be more. And that's where I get all my early art influences from. The next is the area here where we grew up at Dunleavy. When he got back from the war, most white GIs could come back and get the GI Bill and get straight into a home. Black soldiers couldn't do that, except for about 3 places in the United States. Dunleavy Estates was one of them. It was a combination of the federal government and the DuPont family, who set aside some land and made 3 specifically African American communities. I lived on the corner of Mary McLeod Bethune Drive and Ralph Bunche Boulevard, both who were living at the time. at the time, and all the drives in our neighborhood were named after African Americans. Many of them still living: Jackie Robinson, Marion Anderson, or black colleges like Morehouse. And people ask, well, was it like a segregated community? And I would say segregated only to the fact that the surrounding neighborhoods around Dunleith were all white, and they could move into Dunleith at any time. But people in Dunleith could not move into any of the other communities. People who did were bombed, or their houses destroyed, or their cars destroyed. So people were comfortable once we had our own neighborhood, but it was self-contained. We had our own churches, we had our own business people collect trash, and then vendors would come into our community, not only the ice cream man, but we had the meat man, vegetable man, the Amish people would come by with the freshest potato chips you ever had. And so it was a thriving little community. We had our own school, Dunleith Community School. These are my former teachers. They all came from HBCUs, and they really put into us at an early age the importance of African American history. I then matriculated to the University of Delaware, and when I got there, I had two professors, Professor Moreau and Professor Newton. And Professor Moreau was Delaware history. Anybody that went to the University of Delaware had to take a course in Delaware history. And in the course of time, he brought me into his office one day and he said, "You know your family's famous here, right?" And I was like, "No, they don't talk about that in my family." He said, "Oh, no. I think your family has some relevance here in the state of Delaware." Now I knew that there was a Thomas Byard, who was I think he was Secretary of State at one time. I think he ran for Vice President also. But he said no. He said they didn't have slaves, so in Delaware is a funny state. You have to look it up. They don't claim that they had slaves, so they never signed the Emancipation Proclamation. They called them indentured workers, but they were really slaves. It's really complicated. But he said you should check up your genealogy, and I think you'll be surprised at what you might find. And I did later on, and I'll talk about that a little later. And then Dr. Newton, he was the first Black history teacher at the University of Delaware. Our class, when it came in, was the largest freshman class of African Americans into the University of Delaware. The year before that, they had riots and shut down some of the schools, just like they are having now. So our freshman class was the largest recruited freshman class to come in. They instituted Black Studies. We had took Swahili. We had Black Student Union, and they embraced the fact that they had a large number of students of color coming on campus. Sororities and fraternities came onto campus from other colleges. And so it gave us a very good idea of African American history. These two gentlemen here, that's Andrew Wyeth. You guys might know him, a famous artist, and that's Romare Bearden. Both were mentors, I guess I would say. When I was working here at this House of 10,000 Frames, or the hobby art place, they're both in the same area. These are old places where I used to work. Andrew Wyeth lived in Chadds Ford, and hobby art was like 5 miles over the state line. So everybody came to Delaware to buy things because Delaware has no sales tax. So Andrew Wyeth would always come down to hobby art and buy paints, and I would sell him art paints and sell him canvases. And we had long discussions. And I know somewhere in his portfolio, he has a picture that he drew of me. I wish I could find it someday. I wish I could find it on eBay or find it someplace. But he used to be frequent visitor at a local bar there. and it's kind of where everybody hung out. And sometimes, he'd pull out his sketch pad and start sketching people there. And I knew he drew me one time, but I never asked him for the original, and I don't know what could have happened to it. But he was a good guy, and a lot of people don't know that he used African American subjects in a lot of his work. Christina's World and Evening at Kerner's and some of the very plain, bland pictures that he's noted for in his egg tempera style was pales to the ones that he did when he had African American subjects. Matter of fact, I sold him a tube of red paint. I said, I've never seen you use red in any of your paintings. He said, well, I've got a special one I'm doing. And he would always lament about how African Americans were painted in different other portraits by other artists, and correct them and say why egg tempera was the best medium for capturing the finish of African American skin. Romare Bearden, another famous artist, collages from New York City. And I met him, I think, the year before he died in New York City. And surprisingly, he was the one who told me about Dr. Driscoll, who was the top Black art historian in the country. He passed away a couple of years ago. But Romare Bearden, we got into a discussion about careers. And if you're not a great artist, he said, there are tons of other things that we need African Americans to do, like critics, writers, appraisers, gallery owners. And he gave me this whole long list. And he said, if you're bored painting or you don't want to teach, there are hundreds of other occupations you could look into. And I actually was talking to him about baseball. I didn't know he played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. No, not Pittsburgh Pirates, Pittsburgh Crawfords, the Negro League team. And we got into a long discussion about baseball before we even started talking about art. But these are many of my early influences. They still are connected now. Some of the people I worked with at Hobby Art or 10,000 Frames are still around. I email them on Facebook and stuff. And then some of my teachers, I think the last one passed away maybe last year out of that group of the teachers that are there. So moving to Michigan. So having this glorious life in Delaware, why did I move to Michigan? That lady right there, my wife, Deborah, she didn't really drag me. I volunteered to come to Michigan. What we wanted to do was to start our own business. When I first came here, this is the Paula Larson. They had the Larson Gallery in East Grand Rapids. And one of her exclusive artists was Paul Collins. So I had never heard about Paul Collins. I didn't know anything about him. I just started working with them with the hopes to buy their gallery at one time. But, after a few months, I kind of found out she was just kind of running it as a tax write-off for her husband. So we decided we wanted to do our own thing. So we ended up starting Byron Art Consulting first. I brought all this artwork with me from Delaware, from Philadelphia, and that's how we got a lot of our money to start an art gallery, by selling the artwork that we had. Some of those pieces I wish I had back. This picture right here is actually the Black Arts Festival here in Kalamazoo. I think it was the first or second time that we did it, but it was really early when they first started the Black Arts Festival here. We just did all of the outdoor festivals and many of the shows. I think we even spoke here maybe 25, 30 years ago. But it was a way to get artwork out there, because people told us they would go to Chicago or Detroit to get their artwork from African American artists. We said, no, we have artwork, and then there's lots of artists here. This is the gallery that we started on 559 Michigan Street. It was a small place. It used to be a hydroponic plant store, but we didn't live more than maybe 2 miles from there. So for us to start out, and let's try it, and that's what we did, and it grew from there. It became Bayard Gallery of Fine African American Art. One of the things that we wanted to do was to highlight local artists. These are just some pictures. And even here, this is one of our early, I think it's our earliest showing. That's James Palmore. You may know him. He's an artist from Kalamazoo. Al Harris, he's from Kalamazoo. Whoops. Al Harris, he's from Kalamazoo. And the late Reggie Gammon. He put a picture in our show, and this is John McDonald, was a professor at Kendall College of Art and Design. And so we early embraced the regional aspect of art here. We knew that Grand Rapids had Paul Collins and maybe 4 or 5 other artists, but there were artists in Muskegon, there were artists in Benton Harbor, there were artists here. And so we wanted to give a forum for any of the African American artists. It's a struggle to try and get into museums, and there weren't many other galleries that were showing African American art. So we took it upon ourselves to do that for the public. That's like a Kwanzaa ceremony. That's my kids. They're all grown now. So this was at Michigan Street, and then we moved here. This is on Wealthy Street. It's a much bigger place, not much bigger, but bigger than it was. It allowed us to sell African artifacts. We added books, and then we just started collecting African American history items. I was saying earlier that people would move, or their grandfather or grandmother would die, and they'd say, "Well, we don't want these ebony magazines. Do you guys want them?" And we'd always say yes. So we ended up building up a huge collection, but we just didn't have the space. And then this building here on Wealthy Street was taken over by Community College. They had the space next door, and they wanted to expand. So we said, "Okay, we'll give you the space." And so we moved to Kalamazoo Avenue, and it was a smaller building, but we were able to do our framing. We didn't sell as much art, but framing had kind of taken over our business anyway. And as I said, we were slowly transitioning to a museum. So the way we started with what we called the Underground Railroad Show, it's like the Antique Railroad Show, except we had African American and African items, and we take it around to different places, showing them in different venues. And then I still do appraisals, so people would bring in things, have them appraised, just like on the Antique Roadshow. And one of the main reasons why we started the museum was that every place in Western Michigan, every other city, had either an African American museum or cultural center. Of course, Charles Wright in Detroit, the largest before the National Museum and the Smithsonian was built for the longest time. James Jackson Museum. This is in Muskegon Heights. This is the Jim Crow Museum up in Big Rapids. I think down in Battle Creek, they have the Sojourner Truth Museum getting ready to go up. Idlewild has a cultural center. I think they even had one in Holland. And then this is BACC here in Kalamazoo. So all these places had cultural places for African Americans except Grand Rapids. So we said we're definitely on the right path, and let's go with it. So we started GRAAMA.
The Black community has shaped the American character and experience. Now Black History has a new place in downtown Grand Rapids. Visit the Grand Rapids African American Museum and Archives on Monroe Center, 1 block southeast of Rosa Parks Circle.
So that was our opening. We we had the mayor in, we had other dignitaries in, and it was a great launch for us. We were really apprehensive in the beginning because we were going from a for-profit art gallery to a nonprofit museum. And there was some transition there, some salaries. My wife was still a teacher. She was a teacher then, and she's a professor at Grand Valley now, ready to retire. I retired last year from working different other little odd jobs. But the museum and the art gallery are always forefront. You know, they helped us put 3 kids through school. And so we saw the value of not only amplifying our history and culture, but also being able to make a profit at it. The way our museum kind of started out, this gentleman here, his name is Roy Robinson, and Roy Robinson, he is a collector, but he used to kind of hang out at the museum a lot, and he also knew Margaret Burroughs. Margaret Burroughs is she passed away a couple years ago, but she was the founder of the DeSable Museum in Chicago. And the DeSable Museum is the oldest African-American museum in the country. And he brought her to Muskegon. So it was a meeting with the people from Muskegon, ourselves, I believe it was somebody from Lansing there. And she had this drawn out template of how to start a museum. And we all took that, we did discussion, and she gave us a blueprint. This is what you do to start a museum, and specifically an African-American museum. So Roy was very instrumental in bringing him there. Muskegon started first because Dr. Jackson was a doctor. He was a retired doctor, so he had the money to buy a building and immediately put his things in there. But he didn't know anything about curating or conservation, so we were able to kind of help with that for a while. We also, at the same time, the Jim Crow Museum started out. So we did a lot of the framing and collection work for Jim Crow Museum. We alternated. They were on our board, we were on their board, and they opened up, I think, a year before we did. But Dr. Pilgrim up there really gave us a bar that we could reach from our small museum. They had Ferris State behind them, but their collection was just enormous. Dr. Pilgrim's been collecting for 60 years, I think, and his museum kind of evolved a little bit differently than ours, in that it was mainly all his personal collection that he kind of had in one little room, and then they were able to expand into a larger space. And they're actually now, just like us, looking for a larger space. So when we were first approached, our building, this is the inside, this is the outside, our building was a credit union. And the city of Grand Rapids wanted to have some representation in downtown. We're on Monroe Center, which is the center of the city. They wanted some African-American representation downtown. So for Art Prize that year, they asked us, knowing that we had a collection of artwork and we knew all the artists, could we put up a display of artwork? It was too late to officially get into Art Prize, but we said, sure, we know all the artists, we'll take a chance. And I don't know whether this was before or after we moved in. I think that was right before we moved in. But when we looked in, the counters were still there, the floor was all messed up, the walls were all needed plastering. And I think Art Prize was maybe a week away. And so we were like, yeah, go ahead. They'll never get that building finished. About 3 days later, they called and said, you guys can move in. And I don't know what kind of crew they had in there, but they redid the whole building, got all the stuff out of there, did the painting, did the floors. And so we said, yeah, this is good. We'll move right in. And so I think that last picture here is what it looked like when we first moved in. A few exhibits that we had. borrowing things from our public museum and then things that we had in our own archives. The way we started our museum was actually with oral histories. The oral histories gave us a guide of who we should be looking for and what we should be looking for. And when we talked with people, they ended up giving us a tree, a branch to go to somebody else. Well, since you talked to me, such and such went to that school too. You may want to talk to them, or their parents were into the school administration. You may want to talk to them. And so we were able to build a very tight network of local people, and that's kind of what we concentrated on, local people. And that made us kind of experts. A lot of these folks died off. We were able to get a grant from a local foundation that allowed us to do these interviews, and we ended up with, I think, maybe 60 interviews. Some we haven't even edited yet. They're still on tape. That first year, we were able to do a number of different projects. This one here, West Michigan Blackface, we explored the minstrel shows, the minstrel show phenomenon here in Western Michigan, especially down in Lowell, where they did minstrel shows there for up until the 1960s and 70s. We did comedy club. We were premieres at the movies Harriet, and then we created our own exhibits. This one has to do with Black comic books. We actually had the governor in before she was the governor. And then we had ArtPrize. And then next year at ArtPrize, we became finalists and winners of ArtPrize for the best venue. This piece was one of the ones we had in an exhibit we called 50-Foot Women. And it was really a homage to women who had done things in the community. It was a mixture, and I think that's why we won Best Venue. We had this drawing actually got into the top 5 of all artwork that was there. The artist who did that was a dentist. She wasn't an artist at all, but she was just so good that she impressed the judges, and he was able to get into the top 5. We had in that exhibit young artists, old artists, white artists, Black artists, sculptors, filmmakers, all crammed into our little 2,000 square foot building. And we were rewarded by an ArtPrize Top Venue Award. I'm gonna see if I can get this to play, but I don't know if it will. Well, I have to apologize for this. This was when they announced us at ArtPrize, and it's just kind of a funny film because I kind of went a little crazy. I was like really excited about it, and because it was out of the top venues, you know, I knew ours was the only one that sounded grrr with the GR again. And so as soon as he said grrr, I knew we won because nobody else had that in front of their name. And we just really were excited about it. But after that, all these rewards started flooding in. We were able to get, this is a top 20 business leaders. We were able to win that, or I was. We won the Baxter Award. Albert Baxter wrote the book on history of Grand Rapids. Matter of fact, this is what it's called, the history of Grand Rapids. And they give out an award every year. This year we just gave it to Randall Jelks, who probably wrote the book on Black history in Grand Rapids. But I won that award. Down here, this is the local business people. They called it the Harlem Renaissance Award. Channel 8 gave us awards. We were able to get on the cover of History magazine, and History News is like National Geographic in the museum world. So that was quite a coup for us, and that's that same photograph that you saw us doing the interviews with. And then just this year, we won a Giants Award, which is like a top honor in Grand Rapids. And also this year, I've been nominated, well, not nominated, I am co-chair for our Festival of the Arts coming up next month, along with Shelley Irwin, who's a longtime radio DJ or interviewer, actually. She doesn't have a music. But all of these things were rewards that we got from, I think, mainly because people really started to take us under their wing, and they saw the good work we were doing, even in such a small space. But then COVID hits. And so it was a reorganizing of everything that we did. In this case, it was a blessing to be a small organization, because if we were a large organization, I think we would have lost more. But being a small organization, we were able to kind of adapt quicker. Our board and our staff were on the same page because our board was our staff. And so there was very little dissension amongst the people that we had on staff, which was only about 3 people or 2 people at the time, and then our board, which was still a larger board. Future programming stopped or had to be delayed. We had to transfer funds from a rainy day fund that we have to keep the doors open. And even though the doors were closed, the business didn't stop. We still had bills, we still had things that we wanted to do, and we still had creditors. So it gave us a way to kind of figure out things on the fly. And we did get the help of a number of organizations that we hadn't had privilege to talk to before. Grand Rapids started this arts working group. This is a bunch of the arts and museums people who came together to kind of see what things we can do to A, fight COVID restrictions, and then B, to see where we are all on the same page. The Michigan Museums Association, they were great help in that they had a bunch of free programs, webinars, seminars that helped us manage some of the day-to-day problems that most museums in the state were having. African American Museum Association had things that were specifically for African American museums, things that grants or funding sources that specifically looked at what was happening to the Black museums around the country. Michigan Arts and Culture Council, we had been getting mini grants from them every year, but we were able to expand. They were able to expand our grant amount to help us get some other federal grants. Same with Michigan Humanities Council. And our top savior probably would be our community foundation, who came through with a number of grants that kept us through or kept us going through the COVID era and got us back on our feet. But then Grand Rapids gets hit a second time. During the George Floyd episode, we had protests in Grand Rapids, and the day of the protest that happened, our museum is situated in between Rosa Parks Center, which is where our art museum is, and the police station. So whenever something happens, the march starts in Rosa Parks Center and they march down to the police station. So they always march by our building. And this night, we were actually there and were very happy with the way it ended. We started on the way home. By the time we got home, we were getting text messages saying they're tearing up the city, they're starting to break windows. And I was looking at my phone, and I just knew somebody broke right into the museum. And so we turned around, came back. Of course, by then they weren't letting anybody back into the area. So, that next morning we got up with our shovels and our dustpans and brooms and trash bags, ready to clean up a big mess. And then when we got to our building, this building, I think, was the police station. They even broke out the windows in the police station. So it really caught everybody off guard. When we got to our building, it looked like this. Not one window was broken. not one piece of graffiti, and we were the only building on the whole street that wasn't broken into. And so in a way, it kind of showed the respect. People were saying, because we were saying, man, we got lucky. And they were like, no, you weren't, you guys didn't get lucky. There were people standing in the front of your building saying, don't break in here, and making them go down the street. And so we were real grateful. I mean, so we helped all of our neighbors clean up. And, the next part of it was to board up your windows. So we got together a bunch of artists that went around, and all the boarded windows were painted with some kind of imagery on them. We actually ended up buying a couple pieces from the artist that we have in our collection now. And but it gave us a really different sense of the way people saw us in the community. That we actually had people standing the brink there for us to shield people from breaking into our museum. And when I say literally every window, like every window, there was no one was spared except us. We were feeling kind of guilty there for a while, but it is what it is, and that's what we were able to do. And that's why we came up with other programs to help some of our other neighbors. During that period of time, we were able to kind of parlay a lot of that into more good things. I mean, we met with the press. That's our board chair there. Whenever something happens that affects the African American community in Grand Rapids, we're the first people that they come to. It doesn't hurt the Channel 8. It's like 4 doors down from us, but they always come to us. They want to get a quote for something, or they want a reaction to something that's happened in the neighborhood. We did other exhibits. This is the Channel 8 reporter here. She came in and talked to us about an exhibit that we did that was based on the actual protest. We learned that we got to get a lot more printed material out there, so we started printing up a lot more flyers and things that told about some of the things that we were doing. We also noted that we needed to get our online presence, so we started Basic Black 101, which was an online course. People were telling us, we don't know what Juneteenth is, so we started with the basics, went all the way back and started with some of the early things that you should know if you're studying African American history. This was an exhibit that we did that featured the protest posters and things from the past, as well as the ones that we had just taken off of the ground that afternoon. Some of the protesting flyers, some of the actual artifacts we have in our collection now. So presently, what is GRAAMA doing now? One of the things that we do every year is that we have a kind of a theme each year. This year, our annual theme is Civil Rights Act 1964. It's the 60th anniversary this year. So a lot of what we have planned up will be based on the Civil Rights Act. We were able to find other acts and other laws connected to the Civil Rights Act that are specifically from Michigan that we have up. We also are using that as a point of collection from people in the community. We have a number of other things happening. This GRAAMA on the Road kind of branched out of what we were doing is with the Underground Railroad. These are packaged tours that we have that we send out to different locations that they want to talk about the Civil Rights Act. We'll pack out something and send it. We had one just last week. Someone was doing an album drop, I guess they call it, and part of the songs were based on the song "Strange Fruit." Does anybody know what that is? "Strange Fruit" is a song that was written by 2 Jewish men, but it talks about lynching, and it was made famous by Billie Holiday. And so we gave them a bunch of our lynching stuff that they put in a display along with some other visual and musical exhibits. One of the things that we did last year, celebrating grateful things, that was done in combination with the Jim Crow Museum, who had an exhibit that's touring now called Overcoming Hateful Things. So we thought it was kind of a nice play on words. This one had more of a local context to it. So we talked about people who made a difference and pushed back against the Jim Crow era that were from the Grand Rapids, West Michigan area. And then this is an exhibit that's up now. It's called Cries from the Past. It's an art exhibit by Carol Johnson, a local artist. Did some lithographs in the early 80s, about the time we moved to Grand Rapids. Matter of fact, Carol was one of the first artists that we featured. And it's again in combination with an exhibit that the Public Museum has up devoted to Nelson Mandela. This one, Boxing GR, we just had our last boxing lounge torn down a couple of days ago. And we have gotten into a situation with the city of Grand Rapids, I'll tell you a little bit more about it, that will allow us to highlight the boxers that have come from Grand Rapids. One of the other things that we're doing a bus tour in October that we're going to do. It goes around to different museums down in Washington, D.C. We're going to go to Detroit. We're going to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I think one in Pittsburgh. So that's kind of a tour that we're doing. Anybody recognize this guy here? Anand Giordardis. You might have seen him on Morning Joe. He's on CSNBC. He's done Fox News. He's a local New York historian, I guess, as you would call him. But he stopped by our museum just this year when we were doing an art prize project. This artist here is Moses Harper. That's a picture of the young man who got killed on the subway in New York City. Anand is writing a book about him, and they were there doing art prize. He was a Michael Jackson impersonator, and so was she. And so she was there teaching everybody how to do the moonwalk and everything. But he's a pretty famous guy, and we were honored to have him there. And talking about famous people, one of our one of our Congress people, let me see if I can get this to go, made a declaration in Congress about our museum in Black History Month. This was in February. And let me see if I can get it going here.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Holt, for 30 minutes.
I'm not going to let her go 30 minutes. But
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Each February, we come together as a nation to celebrate Black History Month. While we may have just closed out Black History Month, our celebration here in Congress and back home in West Michigan continues. This year, I had the honor of partnering with the Grand Rapids African American Museum and Archives to elevate the stories of West Michigan's heroes, barrier breakers, and change makers who shaped the course of our community and our nation's history. I'm proud to offer now these 6 stories of change makers from Michigan's 3rd Congressional District. Here are the...
I'm not going to let her go through all of them, but at the end, she honors us too. And for some reason, I can't fast forward on here, so we'll just leave it right there. And then the last thing that we're doing, it's kind of subliminal, but this little map over here talks about all the places in the red that books are banned or African American history is not being taught. And just by default, we've become that agent to tell the stories, which is what we do. There's, I can't count the number of school groups that come through our museum. As small as we are, we're able to accommodate most crowds that come through. But many of them come because their schools don't teach or they're looking for certain books. In my next slide, you'll see probably one of our vendors who has books in our museum, and she's always saying that, well, school called up, they want to get 25 of these because they don't have them in their library. And so we're honored to be that conduit for people to learn more about their own history and learn about our history. And so I just kind of stick that little map on there to remind me that sometimes it's not just about exhibiting and displaying, it's really about teaching and educating too. And then we talked a little bit about the future. This is kind of where we are now, or the vision that we have for the future. And that's Kendra McNeil. She has We Are Lake Books. They are a part of GRAAMA, and I think she came on maybe 2 years ago, and they were an online bookstore. Now they have a physical place and are a great addition to the museum. You saw kind of a little bit of what our small museum looks like. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been looking at other locations around the city of Grand Rapids. We actually have been looking for larger locations since we moved into that location. We tried different avenues. We've used funding consultants. We've tried it on our own. We've tried different types of fundraisers. And our board has changed over the years, so it's where you might have one board that really wants to concentrate on fundraising, another one wants to concentrate on finding a building, so we've been kind of in a little bit of a not disagreement, but not on the same page. Now all of our board is on the same page, and I think it's going to be much easier for us to get a new building now. This building here probably has the best price, but we'd be stuck on this bottom floor corner, and so we don't have our own identity. We don't know how many other businesses will be in there. This is where our old antique mall is now, so I think that one's going to have a big X on it. Our first choice was this building here. It's on State Street. We thought this was the #1 location because it has 2 parking lots. It's got 3 floors. It's got everything we need. We started into an early letter of intent with the owners. This was before COVID. We went through them, gave them money, and then this was an old medical building. So we thought they were juggling maybe 5 doctors that owned the building. There were like 50 doctors. So some of them wanted to give us the building. Some of them wanted to get paid yesterday. So it just got to a stalemate, and so we backed off of it. In the meantime, and they told us this building was sold. So we kind of backed off of it. And the same week, the guy who we thought bought this building called us and said, well, I have another building. You guys might like this one. It's not as big as this one, but it's you can work with it. And when we got in there, it was, and I think we had looked at it maybe a year before or 2 years before, but there were tenants in there. There was somebody making prosthetic limbs or something in there. And so when we got there, all the offices were there, all the floors were there, everything. We could move right in. We wouldn't have to do hardly any renovation. Whereas in this building, being a medical building, it had cubicles, exam rooms, all had to be destroyed and demolished. And so we figured that was a big part of the price that they were asking for this building. So this one we got all the way up until about Christmas time of this year. And one of the things that we did learn from this experience was make sure the lawyers see all the paperwork. So when we gave it to the lawyers, they were like, this looks like a good deal, but you guys didn't read all the fine print. And they said, you would be able to get in, you'd have your payments deferred for almost a whole year, but on the back end, you would be paying something like 200% interest. It was like, no, I don't think we want to go there. So we just kind of backed off of it. And as we were backing off of it, he actually lowered the price $300,000. And then we found out that the city of Grand Rapids, who is our landlord now at our old building, moved into this building. And so we're like, what's going on? And so we talked with the city and said, well, you guys moved into this building. How long are you going to be here? Because we knew that this Parks and Rec department was moving in there. I said, well, aren't you all building a new building? They said, yes. He said, well, how long are you going to be there? I said, 18 months. So now our board's thinking, well, can we stand being in our building we're in now for 18 months if we know we're going to get this one, which was our number one choice? They said, the board said yes. The next day, somebody says, well, you know, I can only show you the interior shot. I can't even show you the outside of it. But this is the inside of it. And it's like twice the size of this one. It's got everything we need. There were arts organizations in there before. And it is also, everything in Grand Rapids has parking problems. That's about the only thing we don't like, but we're all on board now and everybody wants to get this building here. So this is our new plan is to get this building here. While we're doing that, the city of Grand Rapids calls us and says, we want you to do a tour, a Black History tour for the 3rd Ward, which is predominantly the African-American section of town. We want you to do a Black History tour. And this is brand new. I just did it a couple days ago. Matter of fact, we're talking to them at 4:00 today to get more details. We don't even know, but I wanted to include it in this presentation because it's a huge project for us. It's like a 3-year project. It's going to be digital archives, digital screens. It'll be little digital kiosks around the place. It'll be QR codes. It'll be like the Hollywood Walk of Fame stars in the sidewalk is one part of it. You go back to that boxing GR. Floyd Mayweather, the still undefeated middleweight welterweight champion, has been trying to get a statue in downtown Grand Rapids, so they put that on our plate. He also wants a mural of himself also, so they put that on our plate. The boxing lodge that got torn down is going to be rebuilt as a new lodge, community center that will have a museum part to it that they put that on our plate too. So we're really, the future is very bright. What we want to be able to do is to leverage all that into a building. So we'll trade all of that if they can help us get this building because it's the gem of what we want to do. And we figured that the building itself has to be the hub. You can't send out all these tours, of which we have 3 or 4 tours that we're doing now. We have a walking tour, we have a cemetery tour, we have the tour of the bus trip that you saw there, and then we also have what we call the green booking tour, which takes people to places like this and Big Rapids and Kalamazoo and Muskegon and other local museums. So to manage all of that, and then I mean they just sent us a preview of the contract last night, and of course there's some things on there that they didn't put on there before. Now they're on there, so I don't know about this because there's a lot of stuff that has to do with copyrights. They're saying everything that you do, like this that I just did last night, is owned by the city of Grand Rapids. So now we got to figure out all these copyrights and all that stuff. But it's a good problem to have, and so we're happy with that. The other thing that we see in the future are young people. We've really embraced young people. Matter of fact, many of our grants are tied to young people. This is the Grand Rapids Museum High School. It's the only high school in the country that has museum sciences as their basis. So we've been mentoring them for this year. One of the ones we had last year, Sarah, is now working with Dr. Gates in Boston. And so we have this kind of a pipeline now where we're teaching them young, they're learning what they have to learn, and then they're going out and doing things on their own. And for us, it's a great thing to have, and it's refocused our whole outlook on how we want the museum to be. I tell people all the time, when I see future grantors and people doing funding, they want to know, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 3-year plan? I look 50 years down the road. I said, what is this place going to look like 50 years from now? I know I'm not going to be around, but maybe a hologram of me will be there, but I don't know if I'll be there. But they said, it's got to have these young people now who are coming through the museum. They have to be engaged and they have to be passionate, and they have to be the ones to take over in the future. This is a little presentation that we're doing tomorrow night, I think, and it is something that we do with the West Michigan Center for Arts and Technology, WMCAT. We've done 2 documentary films with them. This is a documentary film that they're premiering, and so we have these connections all around the community with young people, which is something that I think we're going to grow, and it really speaks about the future of GRAAMA. That's it. Thank you very much. I did, like an old museum person, I also bring hands-on stuff. I always got to do that. So I have some other things up here that if you come up, I can kind of tell you a little bit about. I was saying earlier that collecting's fun, but sometimes the actual things that you collect have their own stories, and the way that you collect them have their own stories. So that's different than displaying them and putting them up for people to see. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions for you. Yes.
What year was were you on the ArtBreak?
That was 2019, I believe. Oh no, it couldn't have been. That's cool. It had to be 2020.
2020.
Yeah, because ArtBreak's 10. I can't go back and figure the dates on it, but I think that's when it was 2010, I believe.
2010.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
What city the Jim Crow Museum is in?
Say it again.
Tell me what city the Jim Crow Museum is in.
Oh, Big Rapids. They're on the campus of Ferris State University, and they're in, I think, their library building, but they're moving into a much bigger building also. Anything else? Okay. Well, okay. I'm gonna just go ahead. You guys can keep going. I'm just gonna talk a little bit about some of the stuff I brought. But this is something. This is one of my prized possessions. This is just a typewritten piece of paper, but it's something that was used during a march in the '60s that tells how to have a successful march. This is really something I just got. It's a pen that Lyndon Johnson used to sign the Civil Rights Act. I found out later on that he used like 75 pens to sign the Civil Rights Act. Dr. King has one. I had one, but it was like a fake one. It didn't have the president and the White House on it. So I just got this one. They were all like starting at $1,200 on any site. And I was able to get this one for like $300. So I feel really good. Like the guy didn't know what he was selling. This is like actually a spent tear gas canister. This was at the riots in Grand Rapids. Guy had it, told me he had it. He said, one of these days I'm going to give it to you. Just a couple days ago, he brought it in and said, I have 2 of them. You can have this one. I know you really wanted it. The other was a pin for the Black Arts Festival. I actually designed this when I was at the University of Delaware. It says University of Delaware on it. And I found it on eBay, and it like shocked me because I don't even have one of these. I'm like, who sold this? And the guy was in Kansas or someplace like that. I don't know how he got it, but he did. And the last thing is a simple ticket to Dodger Stadium. And it was the Phillies. I'm from the Delaware area, so I was a Phillies fan. But there's a game between the Phillies and the Dodgers, but it was on the day that they had Dr. King's funeral. It's the only day that they canceled a baseball game. And so some things look innocuous, but they really have deeper meaning.
Great job.
Thank you all for coming in.
Thank you.
I hope I was good for long.
Great presentation.